Hi there, everybody. Welcome to today's podcast where I'm going to be focusing on your coursework magazine. I've put this together in the hope that it'll give you a bit more confidence about how to approach your coursework, give you a little bit more understanding, and hopefully address some of the holes in your knowledge. If it doesn't, please come and see myself or Mark. At the end of the day, we don't know what you don't know. So if you don't tell us, we can't help you. We're here to support you. We want to do a great job of that. So please do feel that you can come and talk to us. But anyway, the first part of this is really just a bit of a preamble. I've written it with a desire to try and sort of relax you and soothe you into coming to do this piece of coursework, and to try and give you a sort of frame of reference of why it's a really useful set of tools and techniques that we're trying to teach you. And what I've given you are a couple of reflective exercises to sort of get you going. Now, I would remind you that there is a great big piece of reflective support in your virtual tutorial folder. You'll find this in week 1 lectures. There's a virtual tutorial folder and it's got a reflective practice documentation in it that you can use to practice reflection. So the first part I've asked you to do is look at yourself and identify any negative or self-limiting beliefs that you have about yourself, your abilities, or factors in your situation that you think might be holding you back, and to examine what factors have led you to perhaps feel like that. So really good to write that down and to play about with it, almost in a sort of a diary context, a journaling process. Then get your feedback sheets out, all of the information that we've given you on your phases over the last couple of weeks that are designed to help you pinpoint attitudes that you have about yourself, or potential self-limiting or behaviours that actually are really, really effective. And have a look at those sheets and think to yourself, in what ways do these pieces of information reflect ideals that you have about yourself? Because this is all designed to help you, because with incremental success, you can get so far. There's no doubt about it, you'll get so far. But actually, most people will hit a big brick wall. And unless they get something to get them over that brick wall, they'll never really reach their full potential. And a lot of it can be to do with the self-limiting belief systems that we have. And any of you that want to go and become clinical or health psychologists, you'll be able to, this will resonate with you, but it's a common factor of all jobs and all walks of life that we have beliefs that we carry around that may protect us, but they don't necessarily serve us very well. The second part of this asks you to throw all that away and imagine if none of it was true. What if you had all the talent and ability that you would ever need with no limitations? What goals would you set yourself if you were 100% guaranteed of success, and what would you do differently starting today? Now, these kinds of exercises are really helpful to clients and students, of course, who need it improving, to get them over that brick wall, to start visualising what it's like to be successful. There's an enormous literature around sports psychology, so if you're interested in sports, this is where it's at. The major breakthroughs in helping people perform are in that field. So the issue then is, of course, is this is all very well and good, and I can sit here and I can coach you and I give you lots of these exercises, but at some point in your career, you're going to want to go out and apply this knowledge in the wider world. You're the scientists of tomorrow, you're the leaders of your time. You're going to go out and you're going to be looking after people, you're going to be helping them develop. And that's why you need to learn about these frameworks and not just apply them to yourself and evaluate them, but also have the psychological knowledge behind them. Now, in your magazine, as you know, I've started straight into the second part of your assignment, the reflection part. And this is because I've already primed you here to start thinking about it. But for some students, that might not be necessarily particularly effective, and it might be worthwhile starting with the essay. It's entirely up to you how you want to approach this. You can do whatever works for you. So I've changed this handout from the original one that I circulated round because I got lots of student feedback that has allowed me to make this better. So I think I've got a clearer understanding now of where the gaps are in your knowledge. So let's look at the title of this. Discuss goal setting and one associated factor that is suggested to support integration of previous feedback into future individual and or organisational performance. So let's just look at this. I've colour-coded the key parts of the the key parts of the essay. And I just want to stress this bit about organisational performance. This can be interpreted quite broadly in this case. And it can be interpreted into education because this is where you're going to be more familiar with things. You've been asked to apply it to yourself. It will probably make more sense. And, a point for critical evaluation is that actually there isn't that much really good published peer review evidence of organisational performance, simply because organisations are reluctant to publicly publish factors that have helped them enhance their staff's performance, and that's because it's a conflict for them. They don't want their competitors to know what they do. And Virgin and Richard Branson are probably one of the very few organisations that are actually quite open about how they treat their staff. So I don't want you to get bogged down in that and start spending an awful lot of time looking for obscure pieces of literature. Probably much easier for you to really focus on educational correlates, for example. So I've given you a suggested structure for this. This is example structure A. Other examples exist. Okay, this is not a prescription. This is just one approach that you could use. So discuss goal setting theory. So your theories and models, Locke and Latham are where it's at. They started all of this in the 1970s, and people have continued to build on them since. And Mark has given you other examples within the lectures that you can draw upon. But don't forget, you've got an application part of this, individual and organisational performance. So you're going to have a look to see what evidence that you can pull out that actually shows these techniques in practice. So this is the Richardson et al. Paper from 2012 that looks at correlates of university students' academic performance, and they identify some critical aspects that relate to performance, and goals are one of those. So you could use that, and there are other papers out there that you want to be able to give your evidence from. So discuss the theories, put them in some sort of context. And actually, both Locke and Latham and Travers have used samples of people to apply this theory to. So in some cases, the theory will actually have some application evidence in it as well. But that's basically the process to answer this part: discuss goal setting and the application. The next bit is about integration of feedback. So what is the role of feedback in all of that? How can feedback help you achieve your goals? How can setting goals help you use feedback? And what evidence is there that feedback actually helps performance? Again, try and draw on examples from, I've written here, organisations and individuals, but it could be educational evidence and personal experience. It could also even be other areas such as sports psychology. We're quite open to you using lots of different types of diverse evidence. I've given you an example here. This is the Winston paper, which looks at students' barriers to feedback recipients. Now, you're in year 2. We always expect a bit of critical evaluation. Although this title doesn't specifically say critical evaluation, it's kind of implicit now that you'll want to be thinking critically. So we've given you the example here of goals gone wild, and this paper looks at the extent to which goal setting theory is being overprescribed and actually may not be particularly helpful. So that's a good point to start critically evaluating, but you can also use your associated factors to draw upon. To what extent can individual ways of thinking and individual ways of individual attitudes actually be a problem for goal setting? Or conversely, how can it can really help goal setting? If someone is particularly low in self-efficacy, then perhaps they need more goal orientation, more positive thinking about how they can actually structure their the things that they're aiming for and the way that they're working in university and what they're trying to achieve. So that's just one suggested structure where you can get these different facets in. Another one I've given an example here is discuss how mindset or self-efficacy might hinder performance, and then critically evaluate how someone might benefit from goal setting, and then evaluate the role of feedback. So that's quite a different structure, but it allows you to draw on the same types of evidence. It's just organised completely differently. So if you already had an idea in your head about how you wanted to approach this, and this isn't exactly like what I've said, if it's something different from what I'm actually laying out from you, there are lots of ways of answering this. But the key is to try and make these 3 different components work together. That's the goal setting, the associated factor, which is really these personal facets, the efficacy, the goal orientation, the mindset, and feedback, and then the application of the environment. So let's go back and look at the reflection component. Hopefully, having written that essay, you've got to grips with some of the principles a bit more behind what we've been doing. Now, reflection tends to be written in the first person, so you can use words like I and me. It's not scientific writing, it's something that is significant to you. And remember that this assessment process is completely blind, so I don't actually know who you are when I'm marking it, so you can be as candid as you like, and it really is an opportunity for you to explore aspects without worrying about what people think of you, because I neither myself nor Mark will know who you are. So really all you have to do here is select a self-regulatory model. There were 3 that you were introduced to this week. The negative feedback, like high performance cycle, and the phasic model. One of those will resonate with you more than the others. One of them you probably understand more than the others. One will just be something that's familiar to you. If not, Mark's provided all of his detailed notes on the slides from last week, so you can spend a little bit more time getting to grips with it. But remember that the purpose of this is not to ask you to critically evaluate these models or detailed discussion of them. It's just so that you can actually refer to it and make sense of it when you look at your own feedback related behaviours. So if you've had a look at your feedback as we asked you to from semester 1, you might want to think about, well, what did I do with that feedback? Perhaps you didn't look at the feedback. Why didn't you look at the feedback? Why did you avoid the feedback? How did you feel when you saw the feedback? Were you happy? Were you angry? Do you understand the feedback now better, now that you've gone back and looked at it, or do you still not understand it at all? So it's that kind of reflection about all of the kind of processes around that piece of feedback that you received, and try and frame it within one of these models. And the second part is to look at the phases that we gave you, which they're diagnostic tools for you to be able to self-diagnose and think, is there anything that I have a tendency to do or an attitude that I have about myself that led to that behaviour? So we've given you a number of phases. You've got your feedback survey results. So this is a model here of the entire cohort. And this is how the cohort actually dealt with their feedback. If they got something that challenged them, they felt more aware, they were more motivated, and they changed their behaviour. So you can look at your scores and you compare yourself to the cohort and say, well, actually, am I the same as the cohort, or am I different? And reflect on why you might be. The other phases included looking at the ways in which you endorse different types of goal setting aspects. So, there's dysfunctional effects of goals, goal clarity, and again, what you would do is look at those scores, compare yourself to the cohort, and Mark has helpfully given you some prompts to kind of think about how you can actually apply some of this information to yourself. And then we've got the self-efficacy component again. These are the results from the cohort. This is the average. Are you one of these people that has quite low self-efficacy? Are you one of these people that is quite high self-efficacy? So if you're here or here, you're not like the majority of the cohort. And how is that helping you, or how is that preventing you from performing optimally? There's some more data due out called on mindset and goal orientation, and although some of you have already had your individual reports on that, not everyone has. Some people are still completing it, and that's because you're actually asked to articulate and set goals within that. So I can imagine that's going to take some of you a little bit more time to think about. So in this piece of the assignment, you should refer to, but not evaluate, your chosen self-regulatory model of feedback, and that's one of these 3 here. Okay, choose it, refer to it, but you don't have to critically evaluate or write an essay on it. Then you should relate the factors and phases that you want to discuss. Now we've said 1, but so be selective when you're choosing which one you want. You don't have to cover them all. Really what we want you to do is tell a good story. It might be that actually there's more than one thing that you actually want to discuss, and that's fine. You won't be penalised for self-reflecting on more than one of these pieces of information, but you want to pick factors that enable you to tell a good story, and principally keep it concise. So just to reinforce, we're not expecting references in this, except perhaps at some point when you refer to your self-regulatory model, you're going to want to be specific about which one you're referring to. And to some extent, if, for example, you're using academic self-efficacy, you might want to make sure that we're clear on which one that it is that you're using. But this is not a scientific evidence-based piece of assessment. This is self-reflection, and the key aspect of this is that you actually do think about yourself, your scores, and how that impacts on your behaviour, your feedback behaviour. And if, to some extent, one of the self-regulatory models can explain the ways in which you are interacting with your feedback. So, as always, I hope that this helps. Again, I don't know what you don't know. So if it doesn't, the key is to really ask for help and support on this, and Mark and I are completely available to you whenever you need advice. Thanks for listening.